Good evening and welcome to our live coverage of the launch of Starlink 7-11 from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 4 East is scheduled for 4:35 p.m. Pacific Time. That's 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time, and for our viewers joining from around the world, that's 0035 UTC. The rocket is carrying another 22 V2 mini satellites for SpaceX's Starlink internet service. I'm Stephen Young, and I'll be providing our commentary for this mission. Will Robinson Smith is on the road to Houston. He will be participating in the briefings for the Crew 8 launch, so look out for his coverage of that next Crew Dragon mission later this week. If you'd like to support our coverage of the space program, please hit the like button and click subscribe. If you also click on the bell icon, you'll get notifications when the new videos are posted, and you won't miss any of our live streams. Also, please share this stream. It helps more people find our live coverage and everything else going on with our channel. We can't do these launch broadcasts without the support of our members and viewers. We'd like to thank everyone who's made a contribution to help fund our coverage. If you'd like to help and improve and expand our coverage of the space program, you can make a donation through YouTube's Super Chat feature or become a member of our YouTube channel. Membership grants you access to our special members-only videos as well as discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com. We're now less than 30 minutes away from the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket, if all is going according to plan. SpaceX is no longer providing the news media with mission audio and video ahead of the final 5 minutes of the countdown, but we'll do our best to let you know what should be happening as the countdown proceeds. This will be the 5th launch attempt for this particular Starlink mission. There were 2 attempts last week on Thursday and Friday. On Thursday, the countdown was stopped before it reached the final minutes of the countdown. We think around the T-minus 10-minute mark is when they stopped the clock. They had started loading propellants on that occasion. And on Friday night, the clock stopped at 59 seconds. And once again, we did not get any explanation from SpaceX as to why that last-minute abort occurred. And then at the weekend, there were attempts on Saturday and Sunday, and on both days, the countdown was stopped before the start of fueling, and SpaceX said that was due to the weather. There was some pretty poor weather conditions in the Vandenberg area, but tonight everything is looking good, as you can see from the radar. SpaceX says there is an 80% chance of acceptable conditions for launch. And got underway today at the T-minus 35-minute mark. Let's take a look at the countdown timeline for today's launch. The launch director would have given his or her go for the start of propellant load at around the T-minus 38-minute mark. And then at T-minus 35 minutes, the loading of propellants will have begun. Kerosene was loaded aboard the first and second stages, and liquid oxygen is also being pumped aboard the first stage. Between T-minus 30 minutes and T-minus 26 minutes, the loading of cryogenic helium starts. That's an important part of the pressurization system that forces the oxidizer and fuel into the Merlin 1D engines. We are a few minutes away from the so-called big vent, and around that same time, the loading of kerosene on the second stage should conclude. That strong back chill down process will get underway at the T-minus 20-minute mark. The propellant lines that run up the strong back structure that sits alongside the vehicle at the launch pad are cooled by flowing chilled propellants and nitrogen gas through those pipes to cool them down so that when the loading of liquid oxygen on the second stage begins, that everything is in the proper configuration for that to proceed. And the loading of liquid oxygen gets underway at the T-minus 16-minute mark. At T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway. This involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. That's important to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the engine startup sequence. At around T-minus 6 minutes, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. And then at around the 4.5-minute mark, we'll see the strong back structure start to recline from the Falcon 9 rocket. It's around this time that we'll start to receive video and audio from SpaceX. That strong back structure will recline to an angle of about 13 degrees. It leans back from the Falcon 9 so that at liftoff, the rocket can clear the launch pad without damaging that structure. At about the T-minus 2-minute point, the loading of liquid oxygen should be complete. And at this point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellants. And then in the final 60 seconds, the control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will give their final go for liftoff, and then the engine ignition command will be issued at the T-minus 3 seconds. If all 9 engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command to release the hold down clamps, and the Falcon 9 will lift off from Space Launch Complex 4 East. So once again, the liftoff is scheduled for 4:35 p.m. Pacific time. And as far as we know, everything is proceeding on schedule for that liftoff. Just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. That really helps us out. I'd also like to thank Christopher Jones for his Super Chat donation. That is much appreciated. Any Super Chat donations we receive go towards improving our camera equipment and video systems so we can bring you launch coverage from the Cape, and increasingly we're trying to expand to cover the launches from Vandenberg, and we also cover the launches of the Starship vehicle from Starbase in Texas. So just to recap, we do know that SpaceX began the loading of propellants aboard the Falcon 9 at the T-minus 35-minute mark. So that was at 4 p.m. Pacific time. We're now less than 19 minutes away from the launch. The chill down of the strongback structure should now be underway. On the screen, you can see a file photo of what the Starlink V2 mini satellites look like when they are stacked in the launch configuration. This launch was taken last year before another Starlink mission. Those satellites are flat packed, one on top of each other. They are held together on top of the rocket by that silver rod that you can see running up the corner of the Starlink satellites. It will swing back at the moment of separation so that the satellites can fly free. There are 22 Starlink satellites on this mission. Each of them weighs about 1,760 pounds or 800 kilograms. After the solar panels unfurl, the satellites have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon hole thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers. That's a type of ion thruster that uses the gas and electrical power to create the thrust needed to move the satellites in orbit. The spacecraft were built in Redmond, Washington, and they will be deployed in an orbit about 180 miles up. This mission is targeting a 53-degree inclination. So far, SpaceX has yet to show us what these satellites actually look like. They haven't published a photo or a rendering of what the satellite looks like in orbit. However, we do have this photo, which was taken by the Australian company Heo Robotics from one of its satellites. And when they released this, they said it was the first direct observation of one of these Starlink V2 mini satellites. You can see the two solar panels extending from the main body of the satellite. It differs in design from the previous generation, which had one solar panel that stuck up like a sail from the satellite. So we're now at T-minus 14 minutes and 27 seconds. The loading of liquid oxygen on the second stage of the Falcon 9 should be underway at this point. Let's take a look at the trajectory of the Falcon 9 on tonight's mission. The rocket is going to lift off from the pad at Space Launch Complex 4 East, which you can see in this satellite image. Vandenberg, located there on the coastline to the north of Los Angeles. The rocket will fly in a southerly trajectory, hugging the Southern California coastline. Following stage separation about 2.5 minutes into flight, the first stage, represented here by the orange line, will continue downrange to land on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. That's one of 3 ocean-going landing platforms that SpaceX operates, and the only one that's based on the West Coast. The booster should touch down on the drone ship, which will be stationed off the coast of Baja California about 8.5 minutes after launch. That drone ship is about 400 miles downrange from Vandenberg. The payload fairing halves will parachute into the sea after separating from the second stage of the Falcon 9, and SpaceX will use one of its recovery ships to scoop those up out of the water for reuse. Those payload fairings will land a little bit further downrange than where the drone ship is located, maybe about another 30 miles from that ship. We're now less than 12 minutes to the launch of the Falcon 9, carrying 22 Starlink satellites. Just a reminder that SpaceX will start providing video and audio of the countdown and launch at about the T-minus 5-minute mark, and we'll bring that to you here as soon as we get it. T-minus 10 minutes and counting. If you're just joining us, this is the 5th attempt to launch this particular Starlink delivery mission. Previous attempts were stopped by the weather and unknown, probably technical reasons. But so far tonight, everything appears to be proceeding towards a liftoff at 4:35 p.m. Pacific time. This will be the 16th flight of this particular booster. SpaceX recently announced it would try to certify the Falcon 9 for up to 40 flights. This particular booster flew for the first time carrying the Sentinel-6 Michael Freilich mission. It also launched NASA's DART mission, the Transporter-7 rideshare mission, satellites for Iridium's OneWeb network. It also flew one of the Space Development Agency's Tranche 0 missions, and it has also made 10 previous Starlink delivery flights. T-minus 7 minutes at this point, the chill down of the Merlin engine should get underway. This process involves the opening of the pre-valves that lead to the Falcon 9's first stage engines. This will allow super cold liquid oxygen to flow into those engines, and that will condition the turbo pumps for ignition. That ignition sequence will begin at the T-minus 3-second mark. Now T-minus 6 minutes and 20 seconds. Just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please hit that like button. It really helps us out. We're coming up on the point in the countdown where we should start to receive video from SpaceX. T-minus 5 minutes and counting.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
There we have confirmation from SpaceX that the retraction of the strong back is starting to get underway. It begins with the pressurization of the tanks, which gives the rocket a little more structural stability. That process of opening the strong back cradles, which grip the rocket towards the top of the second stage, will be the first visual indication of that operation getting underway. Once those clamps have released the second stage, and we can see them opening right now, you can see those tiny little arms opening amongst the vapor there that's coming off the second stage, just under the fairing of the rocket. The strongback structure is starting to retract. That's performed by a system of hydraulic pistons that pulls the structure about 13 degrees away from the vehicle. For those of you who are used to watching launches from Cape Canaveral, that's a little different to the way things are done at Space Launch Complex 40 and Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. There, the strongback just retracts a short distance at this point and then moves back further at liftoff. But the strongback at Vandenberg is of a different design, and it moves back to this 13-degree position and stays there for the remainder of the countdown and launch. Now at T-minus 3 minutes and counting.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete, and Stage 1 POGO.
And we have confirmation from SpaceX that the loading of liquid oxygen aboard the first stage is complete. The second stage continues to be loaded with liquid oxygen. At this point, the fuel, the kerosene, rocket-grade kerosene fuel, should be fully loaded on both the first and second stages. As we approach the T-minus 2 minute mark, the rocket will soon switch to internal power. We'll see the start of gas closeouts and the completion of liquid oxygen load on the second stage. We do appear to have lost our feed from SpaceX. Try and get that back for you. Well, the SpaceX feed appears to have gone down. Not sure what that means at this point. It did go down at about the T-minus 2 minute mark. We should be like 1 minute away from the launch at this point. Trying to see if SpaceX has resumed their coverage. They are no longer feeding us video. Unfortunately, we should be 30 minutes away from launch, 30 seconds away from launch, I'm sorry. We are a little bit in the dark here. This is the second time the SpaceX webcast has abruptly cut us off at this stage. SpaceX recently stopped streaming their launches on YouTube, and the X feed has let us down before. We should be 10 seconds from liftoff at this point. If we have viewers in the Lompoc area, perhaps they could let us know. We are hearing from some of the people in the chat that it might have launched. Unfortunately, SpaceX has lost their webcast feed, so we do not have any video at this point. This was the 5th launch attempt for this particular mission. The SpaceX feed is still apparently out of action. See if we can get that working again. We finally have the SpaceX feed back up. We are 4.5 minutes into the flight. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the first stage camera as it descends back towards the ocean, and on the second stage of the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the second stage of the rocket, which is traveling at almost 12,000 kilometers per hour as it climbs above an altitude of 160 kilometers. The first stage has begun its descent. It reached its peak and is now starting to plunge back through the atmosphere. As it begins to enter the atmosphere,
Both vehicles are on their nominal trajectory.
The atmospheric friction that builds up on the rocket will risk overheating the vehicle, so the Falcon 9 will ignite its Merlin engines for an entry burn to slow it down. And you'll see that in the displays on the bottom left of the screen.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
And there you see that start of the entry burn. This burn is slamming on the brakes. You can see the speed plunging on that gauge in the bottom left of the screen. This is a 22-second burn. The velocity of
Stage
the
1, entry
first
burn
stage
shutdown.
has rapidly declined to just over 5,000 kilometers per hour. The altitude is currently 33 kilometers. That first stage is targeting a landing on the drone ship Of Course I Still
Stage
Love
1,
You,
FTS has safed.
which is stationed off the coast of Baja, California. Meanwhile, the second stage is at an altitude of 170 kilometers.
Stage 1, transonic.
The first stage now traveling at less than the speed of sound at an altitude of 5.5 kilometers. You should see the drone ship come into view before too long. Coming up on the landing burn.
Terminal guidance.
Stage 1, landing burn.
And there we have ignition of a single Merlin engine for this burn. Coming through a layer of cloud. Ocean coming into view, and the drone ship.
Stage 2, FTS has safed.
You can see some birds
Stage 1, landing
taking
leg
flight.
deploy.
And touchdown.
Stage 1, landing confirmed.
This booster completing its 16th flight. Meanwhile, the second stage continues to fire, coming up on that first cutoff of that second stage engine.
Shutdown.
And there we have confirmation of that shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And SpaceX confirms a nominal orbit insertion. And it has ended its rather troubled webcast. So we no longer have views from the second stage cameras or any mission audio from the controllers for this mission. The Falcon 9 second stage is now in a coast phase that lasts about 45 minutes. The second stage engine will reignite after that coast phase is completed and burn for about 2 seconds for a very short burn, just to finalize the orbit of the Starlink satellites, which will then be deployed about 9 minutes after that. So we'll conclude our live coverage, and sorry that we all missed out on seeing the actual liftoff with the problems that SpaceX had with its broadcast tonight. And we appreciate all of your patience. Particular thanks to one of our members, Callistia Lee, who has thanked us there for our coverage. Just wish we'd been able to see the liftoff after so many launch attempts that were scrubbed. But hopefully The next launch will be from Cape Canaveral. It'll actually be from the Kennedy Space Center's Pad 39A, currently scheduled for Sunday, and we will be bringing you live coverage with our own cameras for that launch, and we won't have to rely on the SpaceX webcast to bring you that coverage, and we'll have complete and full coverage of the countdown and launch of that mission coming up on Sunday. So stay tuned to social media for updates on the progress of this mission. The separation of the Starlink satellites coming up just over an hour into the flight. And SpaceX should confirm that in a statement on X when that happens. So once again, thank you for your patience as we tried to work around SpaceX's technical difficulties tonight. And we'll look forward to seeing you back for coverage of the next Starlink launch, which could be as early as this Sunday from Kennedy Space Center. So with that, I'd like to wish you a good afternoon, a good evening, a good morning, depending on where you are around the world. And we'll see you soon for the next SpaceX mission.